This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time to listen to Be Bold and Be Heard with Matt Jackson and some wonderful guests. So, Matt, take it away.
Karen, thanks again for this platform. This has been a lot of fun doing this podcast with you. And this week, I kind of stirred up something a little interesting. Jesse and Aseem are two guys who do not know each other, but they are both here because they've been vocal on social media about following the rules. And so today's topic, we've had a lot of interesting topics over the podcast, Karen, but today's topic is rules. And the reason that Aseem and Jesse are here is because I like the rules. I like what they're talking about. And they're both being vocal on social media about some of the rules that are existing during this pandemic. And we haven't really talked, Karen, about the pandemic on this podcast. We've talked more about celebrating voices of diversity and celebrating bringing all different types of life to television. And actually, Aseem can also highlight part of his life because we're working on a project. But I actually don't want to introduce these guys and their titles and their roles. I want them to do it because they're both multifaceted people who are doing a lot of interesting things. So, Jesse, it's great to see you. I'm so happy that you joined us today. Sure. And why don't you give us an intro on where you are and what you're working on?
Well, that's a very, I could give a very abstract answer to that because it's
whatever you want.
So wacky and wild right now. I will say for the last decade, I was the director of an organization called Inspire Spiritual Community, which was a nonprofit organization whose mission was to support the LGBTQ plus community in developing a very healthy inner life. And we do that through introducing tools like meditation, heart-centered community, mindful activism, what I like to call activationism, and things like that. And through that, I developed spiritual leadership training programs, licensing programs, and a lot of my students that I work with through that program have gone on to do amazing things all over the world. And I just really value that work. A few years ago, my husband and I began the foster to adopt process as we went to build our families. And so during that process, we were adopting our son, and he very unexpectedly got ill and he passed away. And so working through grief and that experience, and then 6 months later, beginning the process again, the foster to adopt process again with a very special case that was very hands-on. And some of these cases are very intense that I had to devote my entire life to just building the family and these kids. And so I kind of took a step out of my leadership role. I took a step out of my professional life and just focused on being a dad, taking care of the needs of the children, being, developing a support system with my husband. And now that our adoption is official, has been finalized, we just had our 1-year anniversary. The kids are doing fabulously, even through this pandemic experience. I'm sort of now like re-emerging and thinking, what is it that I do want to do again? And what I recently did was launch the Fed Collective, which is sort of a holistic lifestyle destination and a store. And it is in its infancy stage, so it is evolving, and I feel blessed to work with some really great people that are helping me evolve this idea and give birth to it out there. But it's a place where people can find holistic goods, but also connect with like-minded friends, get resources and tools like guided meditations. And we're gonna, once live events and things like that are possible again, we'll start doing retreats and things to that nature. So that feels like really good. And, On the fly, I'm also a Le Cordon Bleu trained chef. And so I love to cook, I love to bake, I love to do all those things. And so I do dinner parties and things like that. But again, right now, we're all just sort of in a kind of a resting. It really does feel like a resting sort of rejuvenation process that we're kind of collectively doing. So a lot of it is just like, well, I'm not exactly sure what I do anymore, but we'll see. I look forward to finding out. So
you're cocooning something great, Jesse. Yeah. You're cocooning something great. And is it thefedcollective.com? Is that where we find this?
Yep, you got it. Thefedcollective.com. And I should also say too, during this time, I've been asked to do something that I never set out, never had the intention to do, but I've been doing grief classes. So teaching people that are going through the grieving process how to do so mindfully and how to embrace everything that comes up around that. So that's been a very rewarding and fulfilling experience as well.
Checking out your website for sure. I can use some of those tools. Aseem Tiwari, welcome.
Jesse, that I just want to add on to what Jesse just mentioned. First of all, I applaud you, sir, for having such a well-trimmed beard. It's not easy to do.
That just happened literally 5 minutes ago. Just so
it's impressive, man. It's impressive. I'm a beard guy. I'm brown, so I grow facial hair in a matter of minutes. But I usually end up shaving just because I can't really get it right, over and over. But something you said really, I think it's important to point out. Having a background in business and et cetera, I'm such a firm believer that anytime you have a massive downturn in the economy or in society, winners come out of that, right? And Matt just said you're cocooning something very interesting, right? I think people like you are set up for tremendous success coming out of it, a year later, 2 years later. I just think 2020 is such an immense time to, dig down deep into whatever, you fancy your value is, and just, set it up for success in the future. So congrats to you, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. From your mouth to to God's ear.
Well, Jesse, you've always been a leader. You've always been a leader in what you've decided to do, and you've moved ahead, and you've had a bunch of different chapters, as we all have, and that's why it's good to connect on what our next 2021 chapter is going to be. But Aseem, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as the amazing man that you are and what you're working on?
I don't know how amazing I feel right now because you guys look amazing and I have a hat on. But look, I have a vast background, investment banking, film and entertainment in India, film entertainment here in California. Lately I've kind of doubled down on combining two things, which is one being a screenwriter, and the second being mental health issues for people of color specifically. I randomly, I'm an immigrant, we moved to this country when I was, I think 10 or 11. And I'll circle back to why that's important. I had a massive panic attack about 4 years ago when I was acting, and out of nowhere, I was at a callback and passed out, and was lucky enough to have a couple of actor friends present in that area that picked me up off the floor. But the process of that just led me to understanding what mental health really is. Because typically in immigrant communities and POC communities, there's no awareness about it. So, I mean, we can dig more into that later, but that's really what I've been doubling down on in 2020, combining screenwriting and those particular issues. So that's what I've been up to.
Cool. And Aseem, do you want to talk about any of your current projects?
Sure, yeah. So Be Strong is, again, going back to what I said about POC communities not really acknowledging mental health. When I had the panic attack, it was so bad that I couldn't really function. I couldn't operate a car. So I went to live with my mom, and it was just hilarious because I was dating someone who's just very white from Connecticut, and she would, if I met up with her, she'd be like, "Oh, what's the big deal? Like, whenever I have brunch with my mom, she gives me Xanax. It's totally chill." And when I sat across from my mom, and I was like, "Oh, this is happening." She was like, "Don't take those pills. That's for crazy white people." Right. There's this like stigma around it. So I thought that was hilarious. And so I started writing around that, and I came up with this concept of be strong, because when things went wrong, for us or with other POC friends that I have, when things went wrong when we were younger, if someone died or you had a hardship, instead of digging into that and saying, "Oh, no, these things happen, it's okay to cry," we were told to just be strong and move on. And that goes back to the survival mentality of an immigrant mindset, because you have to survive when you're in a new country, or if you come from any sort of disenfranchised background, right? It's about survival, and you have to be strong. You have to push through. But to me, it was funny. So I started talking to my friends who, one friend is half Asian, half Mexican, and, she's been on an SSRI since like high school. And I asked her, I'm like, "Hey, do you talk to your, mom about your mental health issues?" And she was like, "Fuck no." She's like, "I have a tiger mom. I can't talk to her about it. She won't acknowledge it." And I was like, "That's funny to me." I spoke to a Black friend of mine, and I was like, "Hey, do you talk to your dad about your depression issues?" And he was like, "No, dude, I'm a brother from New Orleans. I can't even tell my dad I'm gay." And I was like, "Okay, that's really funny to me." Just the contrast of it. So I started writing around that. I have a pilot called Be Strong, which Matt is getting out to folks, and it's suddenly, showing interest. I have a little community called Be Strong, which is like a little secret group on Facebook where I've limited it to a very small amount of people, where we just hop on and start talking about, the taboos around it, and how we feel. And I wrote another script which I sold to an Indian studio around the same concept, but a localized Indian story. So that's I hope that answers it, Matt. I'm not good at answering such.
Karen, we have two really independent thinkers here.
Absolutely.
Two smart guys that are always pushing the envelope. And the reason that I wanted them on the show today is because of their forward posts on Facebook about just, being safe during this pandemic. And Aseem and Jesse have both been pretty vocal about, following the rules. And I guess I'm wondering, why do we think that there are some people that are not following the rules in a time where we're supposed to be protecting each other? And the reason I wanted to have this topic today was because we're in our second week of a second lockdown. And so it's the time we're living in, and it's a little bit scary. It's definitely uncertain. But Jesse, let me ask you, your most recent post on Facebook about, the mask wearing and just protecting yourself. Why do you feel, or why did you feel, and this is just curious, I'm just curious, but why did you post something reminding people that we need to protect each other? Are you in contact with people who are not doing that? Or as a reminder, I thought it was great. I thought your post was great.
I appreciate that. And let me first say, I do not in any way, I reject your label of rule follower.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm like, what? No, not me. No. But that's important, because I will say, here's what I really think is, I've really thought about it. I have a lot of what I've seen, what I've witnessed in the spiritual communities, and this is just what I'll speak to, the spiritual communities, is a lot of people, that don't trust big pharma, they don't trust the government, they don't like to be told what to do. And who can blame them? Who on earth can blame them? Who can blame anybody for having zero faith in our governing establishments? Because we've had multiple experiences where lies are exposed, greed, all that. I don't have to tell you guys. But I mean, I remember it was a really sobering day when I was talking to my friend who works with a very, very well-known congressperson, one of the big names. And I said, I was watching Veep at the time, and I really loved Veep. And I was like, tell me, I was like, how realistic is Veep? And they said, sadly, extremely. And I was like, wow, I thought so. I thought so.
Yeah.
And, so for someone not to, and here's the deal, like, the thing that I've been witnessing though a lot is that people are saying, don't be a sheep. Don't be a sheep. You're a sheep if you're wearing that mask because it doesn't do anything. You're a sheep if you're if you're following the rules. Don't be a sheep. Bah, 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 bah. And I thought to myself, I've been thinking to myself, I've really been sick with it. I'm like, I don't feel like a sheep. I really don't. But I really do believe that there's some efficacy in the mask wearing, if for nothing else, a sign of communal togetherness, something that we're doing together, sign of solidarity, which I think is really healing right now. And I'm not a scientist. I don't give a shit really about all of that. Like it seems like it makes sense to me. I feel like common sense is a really valuable resource that a lot of us have. And a lot of us have been bullied to believe that our common sense is nonsense. And that's not true. And one thing that I really have been grateful for this experience, for the election, for all of it, is it's allowed me to tap into an anger that has been very dormant for a long time. And this specifically is a LGBTQ experience. At least this is how I experience it, through that lens. That I never wanted to rock the boat too much because I didn't want anyone to be upset with me. I didn't want to be rejected. And so I found, and as a minister, as I took on this role as like a metaphysical minister, as a spiritual person, there's all these ideas of what that means. And so I really find myself to be not a sheep because I really question all of those ideas. Like, is that true? I think is that true is a really powerful thing someone can ask themselves. And so I really tried to get rid of any idea of what I thought a spiritual person was supposed to be, a spiritual person was supposed to do. And I realized that I really thought I had to be nice, that nice and kind were synonymous, but they're not. They're really not. And I found that I wouldn't speak up when I felt something because I didn't want to offend. I was too afraid of what the other person would feel. And that just metastasizes, it just turns into something. And so I really tapped into that recently, this last year, through everything, and let it out. And it felt very cleansing. And what I realized was, and this is my take on it, that there is a sort of toxic patriarchy. And a lot of people would roll their eyes at it, but it's the same people rolling their eyes at that think that there's not systemic racism, and what I realize is that that consciousness really tries to beat down the femininity, the feminism, the divine feminine is what I would call it. And so much so, I feel like that's where homophobia is even rooted. Like, how dare you try to express your femininity? Like, there's something wrong with that. Really, really wrong for a man to want to do that or to have that tendency. But I realized too that I'm an emotional person. I express that, and through that lens, I translated it as I'm not smart. I'm emotional. I overreact. I do all of these things, and that same with my common sense, where I would always think my common sense was off kilter. It wasn't right. I was out of alignment because I'm not being logical. It's not logical enough. I'm not doing all the research. I have to have the facts. I have to have something to back that up. And all that is bullshit. It's all bullshit. And I realized common sense does a lot. When I look at certain politicians, common sense tells me they're lying or they're saying really racist bullshit right now. And they might say, well, that's not what I meant. You're seeing that. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that that's what that was. And I have enough life experience to help me, validate that. That's my research that I've done. But so with the mask thing, I was like, it seems like a simple thing we can do while we figure this out. Now, I must say, my husband got very sick with this, very, very sick. He was in the ICU. They were preparing us for his death. We were getting papers in order. That's during a shutdown. It was the very beginning in March. And we had the first shutdown. I was quarantining with 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. No one could help me out that. My husband's in ICU. He keeps getting worse. And the person across the hall from him died. The person in the room next to him died. The person in the other room next to him died. It was the hazmat suits, the whole thing. So I have a very different experience than a lot of people. So my thought was always, yeah, just wear a mask until we figure it out. And I don't feel like there's mass conspiracy theories going around with wearing a mask. And I don't feel like a sheep for wearing a mask. I do it because it feels like the most common, easiest thing I can do to support us getting through this. So listen, everybody has the right to think what they want to think, to do what they need to do. And in a sense, that's the beauty of America as well. But I just really thought about, like, this idea of being a sheep or not thinking for yourself. And like, if you are not being a sheep, then you're not going to wear a mask. But then I thought, no, you know what? I've actually really thought about it. I've done enough research for me. I've had personal experience, and I'm choosing to wear a mask because that's what I choose to do. And it seems like, if you look at New Zealand, for instance, Jacinda Ardern is amazing. She just locked that place down and it's doing good. So I'm like, that's a commonsensical sort of conclusion to reach. There's probably something there. So that was just my whole take on it. But I was just reading, what inspired me to do that Facebook post was just that, I was just seeing a lot of spiritual leaders calling for people to, rise up against, to not be a sheep, to do all this stuff. And I thought, it's not everybody. And for the record, most of those people that I was experiencing, white, cisgendered male. So I'm like, there's probably something there too. But that's just to answer the mask portion of that. So that's why I choose to follow that rule.
Jesse, you also had a very close to home experience.
Yeah.
And now that we're going, and that if that was part of lockdown 1, now we're in lockdown 2. So it's also like, hey guys, for those of you who don't think this is real, this is a real situation. And how is your husband doing?
Good. I mean, listen, it was a gnarly recovery in many, many different ways. And but he's doing well. And people like, a lot of people roll their eyes at like the percentage, like, oh, it's like less than 1% or it's 1% of the people that get it have. I'm like, but there's like 2,000 people, 3,000 people dying a day. Like, that's not insignificant by any means. And maybe it's my experience working in the community and really getting in the streets and working with people that don't have resources, people that need support, that skews my perception of this, of how can we take care of all of those people. But it doesn't feel insignificant because it's 2,000, 3,000, or however many more people that wouldn't have been dead if, there was perhaps if we took a different approach.
That's right. Well, Jesse, I was introduced to Karen through a woman named Susie Unger. And Susie Unger comes from, do you know her?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Susie and you need to talk because you guys have a very similar mission. And since Susie has left the entertainment arena, she's focusing on therapy for LGBTQ folks. And there is a nice parallel there. And Susie introduced me to Karen simply because she was like, you guys have to talk about raising awareness of diversity in people and keeping everybody human. Everyone deserves to be human, and Karen and I try to support that every week. Aseem, you've been also very vocal about people, and in a comedic way, by the way. Not in maybe following the rules is not the right words, but in a very comedic way, Aseem, you have been during the pandemic vocal and comedic and funny on Facebook about, guys, what the F is going on? Like, we are in a situation, what? And so where does that come from? Like, where is that desire to post? Like I'm not judging it. I think it's great.
Yeah, no.
Where does that come from?
Look, I'm exhausted of myself. You know, I really am.
Yeah.
But I think I have a lot of physician friends. I think when you're Indian, you like, you know, you end up having a lot of doctor friends. That's just how it is. Like a lot of us go to med school. I fucked up. I didn't go. So sorry, am I not supposed to curse here? Sorry.
No, that's fine.
I mean, we
okay.
have 12-year-olds listening, but it's okay.
Okay, cool. I don't know. It probably makes the show better if you have to beat me out a couple of times. I don't know. So pretty early on, I had a couple of doctor buddies that were not working in infectious disease, but they were redeployed into COVID because they just didn't have enough people, you know? So just seeing what they were going through, my instinct was immediately like, oh, let's do it for these people. And, you know, like a lot of us were out there, you know, clanging our pots, you know, clapping for healthcare workers in like April, right?
Yeah.
And then we got over it. And the part that gets me is I think we hit a point, I think in the summer where we started getting confident about it, you know, going out a bit, living life a little more. I don't know, maybe you went on a Tinder date, whatever. And then reality caught up to us by the time we started hitting late summer and fall, right? But instead of letting reality actually catch up with us, we chose to ignore it, right? And this is what scared me to death. We started convincing ourselves, and I still like, I go too far, I think, Antifa about this, you know, where I've started unfriending people and I'm just like, hey, if you don't respect human life, then we probably aren't aligned for real friendship, you know? Maybe that's too far. Maybe I'll walk that back a year from now. I don't know. But when we start convincing ourselves, kind of what Jesse said a little bit, that I think, all right, I'll go in a different direction from what Jesse said. If we start using common sense or logic that we inherently have, and we start skewing that towards going away from science, that's dangerous, right? So I have friends who were on board, you know, early pandemic, and now they're not. They're like, yeah, I'll wear my mask, but I need indoor dining. I need to go and party, you know, at a bar. And that's where, you know, I lost my shit in the last couple of weeks. And I went off on a couple of Facebook rants.
Right.
That's scary. That's really scary to me. And the only thing I can explain it to is, this is a far extreme example. Let's think about what happened between the Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda. Let's think about what happened in 1932 Germany when people knew that, you know, Jewish people were suddenly disappearing, but they were justifying it, right? And they knew that they were disappearing, but the authentic Germans or whatever Aryan race people were like, oh, no, it's okay. Those people are just going somewhere. You know, we need to preserve our way of life, right? It kind of reminds me of a bit of that mindset. Like, we need to preserve the way we live life, right? And I have a couple of friends in South Asia. Indian weddings are a big part of life, right? And they're at a point where they're like, no, life needs to go on. We're going to have the wedding, right? And we'll make everyone get tested, but we're still going to have that wedding. And I'm like, are you insane? Like, what? No, don't do that. It's that mentality that has really, you know, struck a chord with me in the last, like, I'd say 2-3 weeks, where people have started using science to completely make up their own rules. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make sense to me at all. And I've gone a little Antifa about it, I think.
Yeah, I don't know the facts of the situation, but I did see on that, and I'm trying to actually not have the news on 24/7. You know, I'm trying to take a break from it, but I did see a news story this weekend where there was a group of 1,000 people who gathered in like Joshua Tree, like a group of friends who like music and like drinking and like getting high, and they were like, you know, we're just gonna go do this. So your group of 20 tell your group of 20 tell your group of 20. And anyways, it got so reckless that there were like 4 deaths because of drunk driving. And it's just like there are people who are trying to break the rules because they are tired of being inside, and we are all tired of being inside.
And look, at the risk of never getting invited to anything cool ever again, I think I'm pissing a lot of people off.
Right.
But like here's what happens, right? I keep thinking about my friend that's constantly, in his spacesuit saving people. That 1,000 friends at the cool party, right? They're going and overloading the ICU. They don't have beds anymore, man.
Right.
Like, they're having to open up like field tents. My friend goes super social impact. He goes and opens like a tent in Compton for the overload folks, that don't have services, that don't have the best insurance, that aren't being accepted into the UCLA hospitals, like he has to go and work 18-hour shifts because I need to get my party on, it's insane. No, like people are forgotten about these nurses, and there's a Twitter account that literally every single day they post a picture of a healthcare worker that died that day.
Yeah.
It's insane.
I actually found
but I want to be invited to cool parties.
Well, you know what? I think you're cool. Jesse, I think you're
Thank you.
super cool. And Jesse, even though I haven't seen you in person in a long time, I think you guys are both really cool. And if this is our version of a party these days, like I'm cool with doing it this way.
I think this is such a layered thing because you have to be able to have compassionate understanding for people that are going crazy, because because it is like social interaction is important. Touch is important. Being able to commune is very fucking important. And if people don't have certain skills, like, okay, for example, my husband and I were talking about this article we read about a man who murdered his entire family, called the police and said, here's where you can find the bodies, and then killed himself. And our response wasn't, oh my God, that's so horrible. Our response was like, yeah, I can see how that could happen. Yeah, sure. Yeah. You're locked alone with them for that long. You start going insane. You start going crazy. And if you don't have the tools to like work through your stuff, it gets really intense. I mean, I think of the people who are in relationships with closet alcoholics, or people that are in relationships with people who have been having an affair that they didn't know about. And now that excuse, whatever, like all systems are all breaking down. There's no interaction. People that are depressed already, they go even further. And then there's a collective depression going on. So of course there's fatigue. Of course we can understand that. And the solution isn't necessarily gathering in large groups either, because then the other side is what Aseem was talking about. ICU units are crowded. People that are there to be of service to help people going to their work are dying because of irresponsibility. There's just not one side of it, and it's really challenging.
Jesse, you hit the word that I was trying to capitalize on: irresponsibility. Not so much that the irresponsibility of it all.
Guys, I really think we decided to make these changes not at the beginning of this pandemic. And, I have to sort of say that's our president's fault. If we had known more in the beginning and we had understood why social distancing was really important, why wearing a mask was important, what we were doing in overcrowding these hospitals, I think things would be different today. The problem is everybody made their choices how they wanted to do things. And here in Ohio, our governor, he was very dynamic initially until the president called him and said, no, don't make your residents, wear a mask, don't shut things down. And then he gave in. And then he said, oh, that was a mistake. Now we are in the purple.
Yeah.
And it's so upsetting to myself because my husband and I were both 70 years old. We're in good health, but we're considered vulnerable. And yet I have people who don't want to talk to me because I won't go meet them even in a park. You know, that's my choice. And just like you, Aseem, yeah, I want to be invited to these great parties. You know what? I want to be alive to be invited to the great parties.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And you don't want long-term lung damage, even if you do
absolutely.
survive it. And you don't want, circling back to mental health, like most of these patients are reporting severe depression issues from months to months, brain fog from months to months. You don't want that. You want to go party for real, you know?
Well, just to circle it back and bring it kind of close to home a little bit, my best friend lives 4 houses down, and when the pandemic hit, we made a rule that we would still go see each other in our homes, and that would be it. Now with the second lockdown, we're not doing that. And I called him yesterday. You know, he's 4 houses down, and I just said, "How are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, the reality is that now I have friends and family who have the virus, or it's 2 degrees away." And so the rules or the encouraging words that you guys are posting on Facebook, I actually just want to say thank you for that, because I think that we have to hear it from people like you guys who are leaders, who are known as really maybe fun, outgoing guys. And guess what? You got to change your ways right now, and you got to be just at home. It's not easy, but we got to pay attention to it. So Jesse and Aseem, I want to thank you actually for the posts, because I think they're reminders that we are living in unique times and that we have to be looking out for each other's safety.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
And also, this is so new. Like, it's less than a year ago that this went down. Like what baffles me a lot are the ideas of like these giant conspiracies and things like that. Like, I'm like, people are just like, our leaders. I have compassion for our leaders because they're just figuring out WTF is happening, and is it like they didn't know about social distancing. They didn't know about like everyone. I was cleaning all of my surfaces. I was, all this stuff. Like it more information keeps presenting itself. We keep learning more, and I think like you said, like it is helpful to like think of us all on a team. Like until we figure it out, like let's just do what the people that whose job it is to figure this stuff out tell us to do, and the information might change, but of course it's going to change. It's brand new. We're figuring it out, and it's not easy. And that's the thing, is to really acknowledge it's not easy. People don't get to see their family on holidays, on religious holidays. People aren't being able to connect like they used to. It's really, people are losing their jobs. Their businesses are closing down. They don't know how they're going to feed their family. All of that stress and tension in there, plus a contentious election, all of that just adds like to it and to it. So of course people are losing their freaking mind. So again, we gotta just like do our best, be gentle, and just do our best to like take care of each other and ourselves. It's not an easy task. This is not an easy task we've been assigned by any means.
Yeah, talking about empathy there. Sorry, I didn't mean to get you off, Matt. Just real quick. One thing I'm trying to really have empathy with is small business owners, that are saying we're bankrupt and we're not sending them stimulus, right? That's a real problem, if we're not sending a small business owner stimulus, or even people that need rent money, if we're not sending them stimulus and not letting them work, man, that's really, really tough, So when, a small business owner goes and protests in front of the Capitol in Sacramento because they're going bankrupt and they can't work, we need a solution for that, that I don't have an answer for that, man. I mean, we just really need to send people help,
There's more people in that situation than we want to acknowledge or be aware of, but there's, especially in towns like Los Angeles, where there's a lot of independent thinkers and independent businesses, there's a lot of people without income. There's a lot of people without help, and we need to support them. We have to find a way. So I guess I want to end the podcast. Karen, we're very fortunate to have these two, brave leaders with us who are I like your voices a lot. And Jesse, it's great to see you here. And Aseem, you know, we will all continue to be strong and hopefully get through all this together. Let's all keep each other safe. And I hope to chat with you guys again soon.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
And
Thanks
I
for being
want-
here.
And I want
Karen,
the
thank you once again for this platform. It's always a pleasure.
I'm adopting your two friends here, just like I adopted you.
Okay.
You have a voice that is so needed. And it's not just for 2020. It's not for just 2021. We all have to come together. I don't care if you're brown skin, black skin, white, makes no difference. We all come from the same seed, so we've got to come together. So thank you so much. And Matt, as usual, I'm sitting here and my jaw is dropping, so I appreciate you.
Well, Karen, you have to remember it started with you being a white woman in Cleveland saying, Matt, I want to hear about diversity. I want to hear about all walks of life. I want to hear about your gay friends, your lesbian friends, your brown friends. That was you, Karen. And I'm bringing it to the forefront because all of America has to hear these stories. And you are a representation of that. So thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Karen.
everybody take care. Love you guys.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.